ITIL Foundations Capacity Management. When you hear the phrase capacity management, the first thing that may come to your mind is maybe things like database sizing or planning for storage space and infrastructure. But capacity management is much more than that. It's making sure that you have a proper level of capacity for all of the resources that are necessary to support your IT services. So that goes beyond just disk space. It includes things like network nodes and bandwidth, people issues. Do you have enough space for the people that work in your company? Do you have the capacity for technical skill sets and staffing? Capacity management is heavily involved in the forward-looking planning of your business, making sure that IT is able to support the activities of your organization, of your business today and well into the future. The bottom line is we want to make sure we have capacity for all of the IT services so that capacity emergencies will be avoided at all costs. Let's take a look. In this ITIL nugget, we're going to conquer 5 key topics. First of all, we'll do what we've done before. We'll cover some basic terminology. Then we'll look at the key benefits of capacity management. We'll explore the capacity management sub-processes. We'll look at capacity management activities, and then finally, we'll finish up looking at costs and related issues as they relate to capacity management. Well, right off the bat, let's go ahead and break down some basic terminology for capacity management. And before I define capacity management itself, let's talk about what capacity is. Capacity management is in the Service Design book of the ITIL version 3. And what capacity is, capacity itself represents the maximum throughput that an IT service or a configuration item can deliver while it meets the agreed upon service level target. Capacity might be size, it might be a volume of a disk drive, for example. It may be speed or throughput of network infrastructure. Capacity management is the process that's responsible for making sure that the capacity of IT services and the infrastructure can deliver the agreed upon service level targets in a cost-effective manner and do it in a timely fashion. Capacity management is going to look at all of the resources that are necessary to deliver an IT service, short-term, medium-term, and long-term business requirements. Now, to help us accomplish this goal, we're going to rely upon an aspect of the Continual Service Improvement book of the ITI library, and that is performance management. Performance management is going to be that day-to-day responsibility over the capacity management activities. This means monitoring, detecting thresholds, doing performance analysis and tuning, as well as implementing changes that are related to performance and related to capacity, which brings us to application sizing. You might be familiar with this if you're an Exchange engineer, for example. If you deal with Microsoft Exchange, application sizing is a huge aspect of designing an Exchange mail and collaboration solution. So application sizing is the activity responsible for getting a grasp on the resource requirements necessary to support a new application. Let's say a custom database or Microsoft Office Word, for example. It could also be understanding any major changes to an existing application, major upgrades, for example. Application sizing is going to help us make sure that the IT service will meet its agreed service level targets for capacity and performance. Next, we want to manage the workload. The workload is the resources necessary to deliver identifiable aspects of an IT service. You can see workload categorized according to users or groups of users. It can be based on functionality within the IT service. Let's say functionality within Service Desk, for example. You can look at workload as the number of tickets in an hour coming to the Service Desk. Workload management allows us to analyze and manage the capacity, performance, and utilization of configuration items and IT services. Workload is often synonymous with throughput. Next is capacity planning, and we're going to look at this more in this Nugget movie. This is really just a process, okay? It's an activity under the umbrella of capacity management. And with capacity planning, what you're really doing is you're just generating a capacity plan. These guidelines are found in the service design book of the ITIL. And finally, we have a term known as modeling. And modeling is simply a technique that's used to try to determine, in a clairvoyant way, the future behavior of systems, of IT services, of configuration items, of processes. Modeling is used quite often in financial IT service management. It's also used in availability management, which we'll look at here in an upcoming Nugget movie, and it's used here in capacity management. Capacity management provides a lot of benefits to the organization. It helps us understand the future business requirements. What are our future required service deliveries? Helps us to understand the organization's operation, the current service delivery, and the current IT infrastructure, the way that we deliver services. It also has the benefit of helping us ensure that all the current and future capacity and performance aspects of our business are going to be provided in a cost-effective manner. It's the efficient management of resources with the goal of reducing IT risk. And we reduce the risk by continuously monitoring and doing performance analysis. It helps us understand the impact of any new services or any changed services in our organization. So as we can see here, there's going to be a tight coupling or a strategic synergy with capacity management and change management. Another benefit of capacity management is to lower costs and to maximize our investment, increase our return on investment, and lower the total cost of ownership, maximizing our corporate investments. By working together with change management, we're going to reduce the disruption to our business of any changes in capacity. It allows us to give quicker response to customer needs, more capacity, more ability to meet the needs of our customers and our users. It also gives us the benefit of lowering capacity-related expenditures. The capacity management process is basically made up of a wide variety of inputs that are put into the capacity management sub-processes. And we're going to identify these here as being business capacity management, service capacity management, and resource capacity management. And then from those sub-processes come a wide variety of different outputs. So let's take a look at these three capacity management sub-processes one at a time: business, service, and resource. And then we'll look at the inputs and the outputs from these sub-processes. In the business capacity management sub-process, we're going to get knowledge of the current business requirements and goals, as well as the future requirements and goals. We have to make sure that the future business requirements for the services are considered, planned for, and implemented in a timely and cost-efficient manner. Okay, we are going to gather data. We're going to gather data from our customers. This could be done through surveys, through interviews, through past experience, past evaluation processes. This is data gathered through strategic planning via steering committees and strategic committees, marketing campaigns, and the results of those campaigns. Also by doing some mathematical trend analysis. So basically, we're going to gain knowledge of current and future business requirements based on data that's gathered. Business capacity management also involves several processes like trending, proactive modeling, the forecasting process, creating prototypes or prototyping, data sizing and storage sizing, as well as documenting present and future business requirements. All of these are under the umbrella of business capacity management. Service capacity management, the sub-process, is going to focus on the usage of IT products and services directly to customers. It focuses on end user utilization to perform their roles on a daily basis. We have to understand the performance loads and the peak loads to meet service level agreements, and also understand that SCM, this is also known by the way as SCM, is tightly coupled with service level management. Service capacity management can be found in the service design and continual service improvement books of the ITIL. The goal here is to understand performance and capacity of IT services, specifically as they relate to customers and users. Again, the resources used by each IT service, as well as the pattern of usage over time. This information is collected, recorded, and analyzed, and this is going to be used in that capacity plan that I mentioned earlier. It's also involved with the negotiation of the service level agreements. You'll also engage, as I mentioned, in these aspects: monitoring, analyzing, tuning, and reporting. You'll establish baselines for service usage, as well as manage the demand for these IT services. The third sub-process is resource capacity management, which is going to focus on resource capacity as it relates to component management. This is the traditional IT view of capacity management, making sure that all of your components that support the IT services get monitored and measured, and that ongoing projects are put in place to improve the component capacity to support service needs. This is a structured capacity management approach, trying to align the business with IT. You're going to decide on the usage of IT infrastructure and components for the various services. You're going to look at staying current on all technological developments, actively monitoring trends out there. This information, of course, will be passed along to the decision-making process for procurement and acquisition of new technology. You'll also be involved with monitoring, analyzing, and reporting on the infrastructure and the utilization, profiling, and baselining of all components. Components like routers, switches, network security appliances, servers, end users' workstations. As I mentioned, the capacity management process is really going to involve a wide variety of inputs that are placed into the capacity management sub-processes: business, service, and resource capacity, and then, of course, generating output. Let me kind of give you a little laundry list here of some of the inputs, some of the things that are actually placed into the different sub-processes. Here's kind of a quick list of some of the inputs that go into the three sub-processes. Things like existing and future technology, service level agreements, a wide variety of different types of plans and strategies, business plans, operational plans, project plans, financial plans, strategies that are determined by steering committees and strategy committees, all the requirements that are laid out for your business and the services and the resources, scheduling and schedules, the FSC, the forward schedule of change we talked about earlier. The FSC is an input into these sub-processes. Incidents, problems, these all go into affecting capacity, as well as the budgetary issues as well, budgets. So all these things are inputs into the sub-processes, which again, business capacity, service capacity, resource capacity, which involves monitoring, analyzing, tuning, trending, forecasting, modeling, prototyping, sizing, baselining, and of course documenting. And then that leads to our outputs here. And what are some of the outputs that we're talking about? Well, these are going to be the capacity plan that we talked about earlier. Other things that are going to come out of this capacity management process are going to be databases, a capacity database or entries in the change management database, data to be used in baselines and thresholds, how we're going to set our alarms for performance monitoring, various reports, capacity reports, change reports, audit reports, recommendations for service levels, also recommendations for costing and recommendations for charging to users and customers and vendors, proactive modifications and changes, improvements to the services that we provide, as well as a wide variety of different types of documentation. Next, we're going to look at the activities of capacity management. And there's 9 actual activities here. We're only seeing 5 on this screen, but there's 4 more on the screen to follow this one. The first activity, the first step in capacity management is to develop the plan. And this plan is actually a formalized document. There is a certain thing as a CP, a capacity plan. This is going to describe the current and future requirements for the capacity of your IT infrastructure and any possible modifications to demand for IT services. For example, maybe you need to add bandwidth for IP telephony in the future. Maybe you need to replace outdated or outmoded end-of-life components and hardware. Maybe you want to keep up with technical developments that are coming in the next 18 months. So the capacity plan should have all these things taken into consideration. It's also going to define any changes are necessary to provide whatever existing service levels you have in the service level agreements, these being your SLRs, service level requirements. Modeling is what we call a capacity management tool, and it's a very powerful method used to forecast the behavior of your infrastructure. This could be measurement tools, estimation tools, to extensive prototyping and testing. These can go on the low end from what we call rule of thumb modeling all the way up to analytical modeling, simulations, and baseline assessments. Modeling can also include trend analysis, which can get application loading information. It can also predict the approximate response times from the end user for an application. Another activity is application sizing. This is considering the resources that are necessary to run new services or modified services. This is going to be information about expected performance levels, the necessary resources for the application, and the costs. Typically, you do application sizing during the initial product development stages, but you'll want to evaluate this on an ongoing basis. Monitoring is another very active performance monitoring capability, monitoring infrastructure components to make sure that you have the agreed service levels achieved. This would include things like CPU utilization, disk utilization, network resources. It could even go into licensing issues. How many licenses are available, license management, making sure that all of your products are legal. Analysis is another activity of capacity management. It's one thing to monitor CPU, disk, network, and licenses, but you want to go further and analyze that information. So you want to analyze the infrastructure components. You can also implement trend analysis right here at this particular activity, looking for potential bottlenecks, looking for ways to improve efficiency, perhaps providing evidence for the need to acquire new infrastructure components, new software and hardware. Number 6 here is the process of tuning. Tuning is optimizing your system for the actual workload or the expected workload. And this is all based on analysis and monitoring of data. So basically, you've got this kind of threefold process here where you monitor, and this is going to generate data. You analyze this monitored data. I'll use the British analyze here. And then that leads to tuning, okay? Actual optimization, tweaking metrics and system parameters to get better optimized performance. Then you have what's called implementation. The objective here is to now introduce that changed or new component or capacity to the environment. Obviously, since we're implementing a change, this is going to involve a synergy with change management, and that makes sense. The 8th activity, the 8 steps, what we call demand management. And this is basically doing things to influence the demand for capacity. In other words, controlling and influencing the user demand. Monitoring databases to make sure that you don't have locking. Performing mail server replication at off-peak hours. Forcing users to access the internet only during certain times of the day. In other words, controlling demand on the user side. And finally, you're going to create and input to the capacity database. This is basically the process of populating the capacity database with the collected and updated technical information, business information, any data that's relevant to the capacity management process. You may break this down and you may store part of the data. Maybe you have the network information in a separate database, technical reports in a separate database, maybe your business forecasts in a separate database, financial data in a separate database, technical data, and you could have different security and different database policies on each one of these individual databases. So the CDB may be a collection of databases that you populate with capacity management information. So what are some of the cost and related issues of capacity management? Well, obviously, If you're going to be purchasing hardware tools or software tools, well, obviously if you're going to be purchasing new hardware, for example, servers or database storage, maybe a fiber implementation for a storage area network, that's going to be your hardware cost. Software tools for doing reporting, for doing monitoring, maybe going beyond just the tools that are built into the network operating system into full-blown suites from companies like Computer Associates or Hewlett-Packard or Cisco. Maybe you're getting into full-blown trend analysis or data mining tools. And of course, the cost related to the management of your capacity database. The process of managing capacity is a project management activity. Maybe you need to get a higher PMPs or train individuals and bring on some project management software like Microsoft Project, for example. There's also the overhead of additional personnel for capacity management, additional training and support. If you have to expand your facilities or your actual building for increased capacity, that's going to be related facilities and services that need to be added on. Those are additional costs. Also, some of the other issues are just simply unrealistic expectations when capacity is added, often due to a basic lack of understanding of the technical potential and possibilities of applications and systems and networking. Maybe management or even customers are going to have kind of an unrealistic expectation of what kind of performance gain they're going to get. So part of being on the capacity management team is to guide the expectations of the customer or the user, making them aware of the impact, the negative impact of any kind of design changes, and letting them understand that the performance gains may not be exponential. Often a lot of the tuning that goes on and the tweaks that go on to parameters and metrics aren't going to be things that are just obvious to the end user, but in the big picture, they're going to improve the overall system performance. Another problem with increasing capacity is just having an overall lack of data or input from the supplier or the vendor of the equipment or the software. Capacity management and its monitoring and analysis can be a very complex implementation. Putting in a fiber-based storage area network, for example, for your capacity management database, increasing the network infrastructure for capacity, these can be complex implementations, complex designs. And like anything, all the other IT services we've seen so far, there's always that risk of a lack of buy-in from management. As I mentioned, from an end-user standpoint, it could be a CIO or a vice president that's using a workstation. They may not see a 10% performance increase from capacity upgrades, either capacity of disk storage, memory, CPU, or networking. They can't touch and feel that particular performance improvement. They may be less likely to buy in to the entire project. So it's really part of the capacity management team to sell management on the long-term gains and the long-term potentials of new capacity, new server space, faster CPU, better technology, newer technology. For example, going from a telephone PBX system to an IP telephony or a voice over IP system may be one of those things that you really have to campaign to get buy-in from management. They may not necessarily notice any improvement in the quality of the phone service or the quality of the phone call, but showing them the long-term cost benefits and the long-term benefits of implementation, management, monitoring, analysis, and overall integration may be necessary to sell management on such a huge capacity change. In this ITIL version 3 Nugget movie on capacity management, we covered 5 key areas. First of all, we explored some basic terminology. Then, the benefits of capacity management, as well as the goals. We looked at the 3 main capacity management sub-processes: business capacity management, service capacity management, and resource capacity management. We also looked at the 9 capacity management activities, which include developing the plan, modeling, application sizing, monitoring, analysis, tuning, implementation, demand management, and of course, populating the capacity database. And then finally, we looked at some cost of capacity management and related issues. I hope this CBT Nugget has been informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing. We'll see you in the next movie. Take it easy.